Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast,
where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we are going to discuss how to fix Disney Animation, Pixar, how to fix their issues at the box office. Now, I know Inside Out 2 is doing well, but their solution seems to be, let's just make sequels. And I don't want to speak for you, but I don't necessarily think that just making sequels is a great solution long term to kind of fixing their box office woes.
Yeah, I feel like I've already, shared a lot on this podcast, more about the remakes that they're doing, the live action remakes, but I also feel similarly about sequels. So yeah, no, you're not speaking for me there. I will say though, some of the best Disney movies have been sequels. Frozen 2.
I'm not saying sequels are bad,
but at the same time, I do think you back yourself into a corner there of always doing something that you've already done. And again, I think we're going to talk about just the company. Part of what makes the company so alluring is the creativity, and so without that creativity, then they're not that different than anybody else.
Right. So we got solutions. We'll get into that. Want to cover the Disney news of the week first. Before we get into that, though, do want to mention next week we will be off, so no show next week, summer vacation. So we'll be back in 2 weeks, though. But the big news of the week is Genie Plus is no more. It's now, they somehow made it more confusing. It's now Lightning Lane Multi-Pass and Lightning Lane Single Pass.
So I just saw a hilarious meme. I don't think you probably saw it, but I sent it to you on Instagram, and it is oh my goodness, what is Harry's dad from Spider-Man? Willem Dafoe.
Oh, okay.
It's
Green
like
Goblin.
Yeah, it's Green Goblin, but it's like from that Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, and him freaking out about just figuring something out, and now it's changed.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so this is crazy. Kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere. Yeah. But yeah, tell us about.
I mean, I think a lot of people have complained about Genie Plus, and I think a lot of people, including us, have said, "Wow, charging for FastPass isn't ideal. Like we aren't in favor of Disney charging more money for stuff that was free. But if you're going to charge for something, why did they not just say it's FastPass and now you got to pay for it?" And they didn't. They went to Genie Plus. It was confusing. There was all sort of, tips and tricks on it because you could only pick one every 2 hours. And then it was like everybody had to get up at 7 a.m. and book it, and people complained. So they are basically going back to FastPass, which I think is like what they should have just done in the first place. They're keeping the Lightning Lane name. I don't know why they didn't just go back to FastPass. Probably because they paid to change all of the FastPass signs on the rides to Lightning Lane. So they stuck with that. So it's Lightning Lane Multi-Pass or Lightning Lane Single Pass. So the Single Pass is basically what they had before is the Lightning Lane, like if you just buy one attraction. And then the Multi-Pass is now essentially what FastPass was, but you're paying for it.
I think they like the fact that it's alliteration, right? Lightning Lane sounds nice, although I prefer FastPass, and they want that differentiation between what people are going to say. I mean, everyone's smart enough to say this already, is you used to give us FastPass for free, and now you're going to charge us for it and call it something else, but it's the same thing.
It's the same thing, yeah.
But
so how this is going to work is this is starting July 24th. This is at both Walt Disney World and at Disneyland. They're both switching. What you're going to be able to do is if you're staying on Disney property, you will be able to book 7 days in advance for your entire trip. If you're not staying on Disney property, it's 3 days before. So you get an advantage of staying on Disney property. What is nice about this is you do not have that 7 a.m. wake up every single day of your trip. You can make 3 selections, and they're going back to the old tier model. It is really just like FastPass, where you can pick 1 from tier 1 and then 2 from tier 2 or all 3 from tier 2. That's how they kind of keep people from like everybody picking a ton of fast passes for like the top tier attractions. That's how they kind of maintain some sort of capacity and stuff for those rides. But if you get it day of, so you can still buy it day of, the tiers go away. So if you just are there, you buy it day of, you can pick from any attraction you want. You can ride everything just one time though. So once you do it, you can't have it. again. And then after, so you get 3 pre-selections. Once you use one of your lightning lanes, once you redeem one, you can then immediately book a next one. So you don't have that like 2-hour wait window. Basically, you use one, you get another one. So I think this kind of goes back to how FastPass was, like, try to book them as early in the day as possible, because like if your first one's not till 2:00, you're not gonna be able to book another one.
You're gonna miss out all morning
until 2. So try to get them early. And then also if you are doing park hopping, once you're there. So all 3 of them have to be in one park, but again, once you use one, you can go to any park after that to make your next selection.
And that's the multi-pass, right?
Yeah, that's basically the multi-pass
and then
option.
The second option is what is
it's a single pass.
So it is just one ride if you want to ride something that
It's the same thing they have now with, like, if you want to ride Tron or you want to ride Guardians of the Galaxy, you can pay X number of dollars depending on the day to get an attraction on that. The other nice thing they did with this is you can see what's available and make your selections before you check out, which I think is a nice feature, because you don't want to pay $20 or $30 and then be like, oh, nothing I want to ride is available.
Yeah. So, and that is something that, because I'm not the person who operates the Genie Plus whenever we go to the park. So you were telling me, and if anybody who's listening is either the person who doesn't coordinate that in your group, or you've never used it before, whenever you use Genie Plus, you would purchase it for the day and then had access.
Well, you could see what's available, because like on the Genie, and I think the free Genie Plus features are still there. So like the whole Genie thing is not completely going away. So it's still like you have the tip board to help you like plan your day. So you could see what was available in terms of lightning lanes. But you could see every like attraction before you made the purchase. But this, you're actually like selecting all 3 options and seeing what time you can get and what 3 attractions. So yeah, you could look and go, all right, I can get Haunted Mansion at 9 a.m. and maybe Space Mountains at like 5, but by the time you make the purchase, those might be gone. So this way you can kind of see it all ahead of time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I think that the internet's gone off pretty well about this. This is a feature that Disney used to provide for free that they are now charging for, which, I mean, I think that this probably sounds like it's better than Genie Plus.
Yeah, and they charge for Genie Plus too. Like that's
right.
I mean, I think I get people. Yeah, hey, Disney's charging stuff, but it's not like they weren't charging a Genie Plus. So now, do they charge more money for it? Is the question.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is new, and it's not new, but it's new because you got to think about, okay, yeah, they used to give you the fast passes, and then they say no more fast passes, but we have this Genie Plus thing. And so really they're just bringing back FastPass that's just paid. So that is a thing where it's like, okay, well, technically, yeah, we used to pay for it, but before that we didn't pay for it. So it was free. And again, what is frustrating to me is when you pay the amount of money that you are paying to go into a Disney park, and I know that amount ranges. I mean, I don't even know what the ticket price is. Like the low end is like, is it around 100?
You're at least 110. Probably,
yeah, and up to like probably like 150. I'd say
even more than that.
Probably even more than that. So if you're paying 100 to 100, we'll say 175. I don't even know if it's even remotely close, but $100 to $175 a day to be in a park and rides within the park, then you should have those rides available to ride and have the same fair ability to get on those rides as everybody else. Like I don't know. I guess to a certain extent, it just becomes almost probably more relevant to get up early in the morning, like we always say, because people who are going to purchase this, they're not going to buy probably a fast pass for first thing in the morning, I'm guessing, because who wants to get a 8 a.m. fast pass when you can hopefully just rush into the line and rope drop.
Yeah, and I think time will tell too on how this all works, because I've already heard some things of like international guests can't buy this ahead of time. So if you don't live in the United States, you're not going to be able to do this ahead of time. Even if you're staying on Disney property, you don't get the 7 days advance. So you have to do it day of. I think the other thing for me is I think this is actually going to push more people to buying it. And I don't know if that's maybe why Disney did it. Like we talked a little bit about this, where what I did kind of like about Genie Plus is you could buy it day of, or like, you know, one day on your trip, but you're there. So you can kind of see, are the parks crowded? Like you can kind of get that. And we've talked a lot about this too, where Genie Plus probably didn't make sense in most of the parks except Magic Kingdom, just because of the number of attractions that are there. Don't really necessitate having to wait less in line. Like to your point, you can rope drop and get a couple of the big attractions out of the way and then kind of have enough time to get through everything. I mean, Animal Kingdom doesn't even have tiers, because I think Flight of Passage is the like the single pass where you just buy to ride that one. So it's like there's not really much else there to really worry about. And I think that still kind of holds true. But I think what's going to happen now is now you have to look 7 days out and you have to think, okay, what are crowds going to be like?
You're trying to project.
You're trying to project it, and you're trying to project what park am I going to be in? Am I going to need it? Am I not going to need it? And I think you're going to get a lot of people that are going to go, well, I might as well just pay for it because then I know I have it, versus waiting until day of. Because if you wait until day of, all the good stuff's probably going to be booked, which is kind of how FastPass was. Like it was tough sometimes to get good times for those popular attractions, because again, if you're taking a 5-day trip and I'm taking a 7-day trip and I'm booking 7 days ahead of time, I can book for my whole trip before 2 days before you even get on. And so I think that's going to play into it too. And that's the one downside of it that I don't necessarily like, is I think it's going to push more people into buying this than really need to.
Well, it also reminds me of traffic patterns. Okay, so follow me on this. So, you know, if you have 2 lanes on a highway and then one of the lanes is closed, then technically what people are supposed to do is zipper in. You're supposed to drive down and then zipper in. And then if you take turns, that continues, you know, everyone kind of waits about the same amount of time. But then the problem comes when people don't quite follow that rule. And this is kind of what I feel like FastPass does, because I remember when we went down, I think it was around, you know, right after the pandemic, there was no FastPasses. It was just everybody was in the line, and they had gotten rid of it. And we even like made a comment. It wasn't even because there were not that many people there. It was like how quickly the lines moved for how many people were there. And they were like, oh, it's because there's no FastPass.
Yeah, there's no FastPass. And that's I think another point too, is like, you know, Universal Studios has essentially a FastPass. It's called Express Pass. And you know, you can go ride every ride. You basically don't wait at all, but I don't think it impacts it. Now they charge a lot more. You don't hear people really complaining that like, oh, Universal's charging you to skip the lines. And I almost think it's because it's so expensive, like not as many people use it. And so people kind of see it as like, all right, that's a little bit of a luxury that a really small group use. And it really doesn't impact the wait, because there's usually not a lot of people in that line to kind of impact it. Whereas I think Disney's kind of used the other way, because with FastPass it was free, so you had a lot of people doing this, and so now you're making it a model where you're paying for it, but you still have people used to using this, so you're going to have so many people using this. And you're right, I think they do like 90 to 10, like 90%, you know, to 10% lightning lane line versus the regular standby line, and so it just makes the regular wait longer. And I think that's kind of the crux of the issue, is they're making you pay for something, and it's also hurting the experience of everybody else who's not paying. Whereas like Universal, it's very expensive. Not a lot of people use it. So it really doesn't, if you don't pay for it, it doesn't really impact you in the same way that, I mean, you can double the wait time on an attraction at Disney because you have so many people in the FastPass or lightning lane line.
So are we going to be in the camp of, well, if you're going to go ahead and do this, you better charge a crazy amount of money for it so that it becomes almost that unattainable level, so that everybody else can have a nice park experience?
I don't think Disney can do that either, just because they have so many people. Like there's so many people that go there. Like, you know, twice as many people go to Disney as they go to Universal. And I mean, they're obviously playing with like a different scale of things. It's interesting. I still think, I mean, I probably don't think we pay for this very often. Again, maybe a day we're going to the Magic Kingdom and we want to ride some stuff. I do like the individual ones, like, again, and it's more day of, like, hey, it's crowded, let's just pay $15 and skip the line. But I think looking, a week out, it's like, I don't know what crowds are going to be like. I don't want to necessarily, especially for like Epcot or Animal Kingdom. I think you're just kind of wasting your money at those parks.
Yeah. I don't know. I always think back to, I look at us as kind of like, privileged, because we do get to go down to Disney World pretty often. We go so if we don't get to ride, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad and even the Haunted Mansion, it's like, well, we've ridden those before. We know what they're like. It's a bummer we didn't get a chance to get on them, but it's okay. Whereas a family that is going down, they're doing their one trip. Like I went when I was 9. We didn't go any other time. I went when I was 9. That was it. And my dad was a truck driver. And my mom didn't work. So like that was, I'm sure, a large chunk of change for my family. So I kind of look at it through that lens where I'm just like, that family now, if they don't purchase the upgrade of the lightning lanes, then their day might include 3 rides, because they're waiting in those lines for so long. I think you still get more than 3 rides. Again, I think it's park to park. I think you kind of have to factor in. Well, if they have kids too, you have to think kids only have so long that they could be in one area, and you have to kind of entertain them.
That's true.
So like, it just kind of dampens that experience for them. And again, I think that they're going to see a lot of customer satisfaction drop because of this, because people are going to be like, dude, I waited in line for a really long time.
I don't think you see that. I disagree with that, because I don't think it's going to change necessarily because again, they're doing this already with Genie Plus. I think the people that are buying Genie Plus are going to buy this. I actually think you see satisfaction go up, because now you can book all of this ahead of time. You're not getting up at 7 a.m. You're not worrying about, to your point, you have a family. You got to get up. You have to remember to book your, buy your Genie Plus, book all your attractions, get your kids up, get breakfast, get everybody out. Like, you can do all that ahead of time. So I actually think it helps with satisfaction.
Maybe.
But yeah, it's not going to help the standby lines. It's not going to help the crowd. Like, that stuff's not going to go down. I mean, it's only going to get higher, if anything. So
yeah, time will tell.
All right, so let's get into it here. So Inside Out 2 has been doing very well at the box office. At the time we're recording this, it's very close, if not just past $500 million worldwide. So it is kind of back to form for Pixar in terms of being number 1 at the box office opening weekend. Good word of mouth. The whole thing of people are just going to wait for it to be free on Disney Plus, kind of out the door. So, they had a strong sequel here. It's doing well. Don't necessarily need to get into spoilers, but I mean, we both saw it. I think we both thought it was a really good movie.
Yeah, I thought it was really clever. They used a lot of interesting, little things that we say. For example, a brainstorm, they find a way to bring that to life. So, and there's more than one example of those throughout. And so it's just a really clever movie. And again, like I know that they bring in more like complex emotions. And I think that when they bring those in, it's making a lot of adults and children like feel very seen. Like, I think it does a really good job of kind of portraying, again, like emotions that are a little bit more invasive, ones that we don't necessarily love to talk about or love to have. So I think that they do a good job of kind of developing just like sadness as an emotion that we don't always glorify or talk about in a positive light, even though it has its role. It kind of does a similar thing with anxiety and how like the role of that and combating it and things like that.
Yeah, I like how they played the new emotions. Like, they kind of made the connection of how these emotions are kind of almost the evolution of the original emotions. Like, embarrassment and sadness were very similar. It's just a more complex version of it. Disgust and ennui. Like, it's very basic joy, sadness, and then, kind of as you grow up, it's kind of indifference to things is kind of a bit of a disgust, embarrassment, that sort of thing. So I did like how they played that. I think why this is doing well, it's a very good movie, but I think it is kind of getting back to Pixar of, like you're saying, a way of bringing like an abstract thought together. I mean, I think Elemental ended up doing well at the box office. Now this is blowing past Elemental, but Elemental was like that of, again, they built a world, whereas I feel like some of their previous ones, and we'll get into these, some of the ones that maybe haven't done as well, lately, like Soul, Luca, like they're more based on humans. I mean, yes, there is some of that abstract and conceptual stuff to it, but at the end of the day, it's very much kind of just like in the real world to a certain extent, and they don't I feel like that's not their strong suit there.
They're more like, and I mean, these are more fantasy, science fiction-y based things, as opposed to, like you said, like Soul. You know, of course, there's magicalness in that.
It's like the afterlife, but it's still a very like human-based thing.
Yeah, so it's like you have Soul and you have Luca, where it's like, okay, well, he's a fish person, and you have like the underwater stuff, but that's still stuff that people are familiar with. And then whenever he comes up on the land, he's in Italy, so that's like a real place.
Right, and most of the movie was about him wanting to be a human in Italy, and not really being underwater. So, but as I was watching Inside Out 2, and you know, they had a ton of previews for other Disney movies, so like Mufasa, Moana 2, like all of the sequels coming out, it got me thinking of, yes, while Inside Out 2 was good and it's doing well, it seems like Disney's approach to sequels are, you like the first movie, we're going to do it again.
There's another one just like it.
And it's going to be 2. I mean, based on essentially Inside Out, same general story as the first one. It seems like Moana 2 is like the exact same movie. It seems like Mufasa is the Lion King, but it's Mufasa instead of Simba. Like, from the trailers, it doesn't seem like there's anything that's differentiating it from the first one. My other thing is, they're naming all of these movies too. I mean, Frozen was like this. It's Frozen 2. It's Moana 2. It's like, you know, when you do like Marvel movies or other movies, like when they do sequels, they have a subtitle to kind of differentiate it. And I feel like they're just like, we're not even going to do that. That's because when you're searching for it, you just want Moana, and you don't care whether it's Moana 1, Moana 2. And like, my concern is Disney getting too big that they're afraid to take risks? And I think you're seeing that in some of the movies because they've had some missteps with Pixar, like we talked about with Soul and Luca, and even Turning Red. And some of that was, hey, they put it on Disney Plus. It wasn't in theaters. It was the pandemic. But even like we talked about with Wish, like it feels like they rushed it because they
Strange
needed a
World
movie.
didn't do too well.
And you get to this point where, you know, you become the biggest company at the box office, and the expectation is every movie you have has to open number one. They were to the point where if it didn't make $1 billion, it was a failure to a lot of people. And so I think when you get to that point, you almost get scared to try new things. That's why you see a lot of sequels, because it's like we know people like those, so let's just give the people what they want.
I think that's also the reason why they aren't getting creative titles. Like the sequels aren't getting creative titles. They're like, yeah, you like the first one. Well, here's a second one. So just associate, you liked Frozen. Well, Frozen 2 is just like Frozen. So just
it's gonna be the same
lump
movie.
them into one thing. And I think that's kind of why they didn't do like a Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. And even that movie wasn't even intended to have a sequel, but they gave it like a subtitle.
Oh, the first one, yeah.
Yeah, and then every other one after that also had like a interesting creative title. I will say.
Yeah, could you imagine if they just called them Pirates of the Caribbean 1, 2, 3? Like, you would be like, okay, what one was 3? I don't remember what happened in that one. But when you say At World's End, Dead Man's Chest, you kind of at least can remember and differentiate them a little bit better.
I was just going to make the argument that I actually don't know all of their titles, but I did know which ones, when you were naming them, they were. Now, I can't tell you. I can't remember what. Is it Fountain of Youth? Is Fountain of Youth 4?
It's At World's End.
No, 4. At World's End is number 3, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And then number 4 is.
Yeah, I don't remember the rest of them.
It's the one about the Fountain of Youth. And then 5.
They got kind of squirrely after.
And then, number 5 is the one that I super don't know.
Yeah. But so I was thinking of this, and I was thinking of like, yes, it's good they're making these sequels. It's good they're making movies that people like, that people are going to go to the box office again. But I think it's masking the issue that Disney had recently, and I don't think that's gone away, because I think you're going to run into the problem of everything is just a sequel now, and we're just going to remake the first movie. And I think while that may work, because I mean, Moana came out in 2016. At this point, it's kind of nostalgia. Like, the kids that watched Moana.
No, it has to be several more years before nostalgia comes out.
That's true. But like, you got to figure, if you were 10 when Moana came out, you're 18 now. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the kids that grew up watching Moana are teenagers.
Crazy.
So they're going to want to go see it because it's kind of like, hey, it's going back to when they were younger. And then there's a whole new generation of kids that you could pretty much tell the same story to, and they're going to like it. But again, I think that's not necessarily a long-term approach. Like, you have to be willing to take creative risks still.
Well, when they're on Moana 7, Moana's in the water again. Like, I don't
more water.
More water. No, I think I'm giving too much credit because I'm giving a subtitle. But like, that can't last. And so I think that kind of what we're going to be discussing is how to sort of continue on with the model that they're currently using, but also find a way to creatively work on something new in a less risky situation.
Yeah, and so what my thought was, and what I kind of said to you after we saw the movie, is because it like kind of clicked to me whenever we were watching all the trailers, is Disney needs to make another animation studio. Mm-hmm. And they have history and precedent for this. So they did this back in the 70s. And Ron Miller was CEO at the time. And in the 70s and kind of early 80s, the perception of Disney was that it was just for kids. All the movies were G for general audiences. They were kids' movies. So when you saw a Disney movie, teenagers, adults, they didn't want to go to them because they said, that movie's for kids. I'm not going there. And so they said, we need a way to make PG. I mean, they were trying to make PG movies at the time. That was like as risque as they wanted to go.
Here's my question, though. Because
the rating system was crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you go back and you watch a G movie from like the 1990s and 1980s and you're like, whoa, what? They could say that? Or they could do that? They got that many swears? Like, because as a teacher, I'll pull some of that stuff up and I'll be like, oh my gosh.
It's amazing they haven't re-rated those movies. Yeah. Because you're right. A lot of those that were G would definitely be like PG and maybe
PG-13 potentially
into some of them. So PG movies, what they were trying to do, didn't do very well. So they said, hey, we need a different brand to try new things and to release some of this stuff. So they developed Touchstone Films. And this was after, like, they did The Black Hole, Escape to Witch Mountain, Tron. And again, that was trying for more, Tron now is a cult classic. They're making a third one. But when it came out, it lost over $27 million. And that was PG. That was, again, not straight to kids. And it didn't do well because people were like, it's Disney. Why am I going to go see that? So Ron Miller had this idea to create Touchstone Films. And it was a new production company. They created it in 1984. And it was basically just a brand name. It wasn't like it was a new thing. I mean, it was still Disney producing all this stuff. It was still Disney movies. Per se, but it was just a name. And the first movie they did under this was Splash, which you can see on Disney Plus. We watched it a year or two ago, and it did extremely well. It was like a huge success because it wasn't Disney, and so people didn't equate it as this is going to be a kids film. I don't want to go see it, and they were able to try other things under this label.
Right. I mean, was this Tom Hanks's like first breakout? I can't remember what we talked about Splash.
Yeah,
I think we actually had a whole episode on Splash.
I think we did. Yeah.
And I think it was one of like his.
It was definitely early career. I mean, 80, 84. I mean, early 80s. It was definitely early in Tom Hanks's career. I don't know if it was his like first.
Yeah,
big role,
I'm trying to think of what would. I think Turner and Hooch probably came later than that. But I'm just trying to like. I think it was a relatively early film. I was gonna say maybe they got Tom Hanks, who was a name, but I don't think that's...
Turner and Hooch was another movie they did. I didn't write that one down, but I do remember, I think, seeing that. So maybe that was after Splash, because if that was the first one. But some other notable films that Disney released under Touchstone was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is a very popular one. That was actually under Touchstone. Dead Poets Society. They did Sister Act. The Water Boy was the Touchstone movie.
Hilarious.
The Prestige, which this is Christopher Nolan.
This is a crazy list of movies. Like, and if you said The Prestige is a Disney movie, you'd be like, no, it's not.
Right. It was done under their production company. Signs.
Fun fact.
With M. Night Shyamalan.
Fun fact. I wrote a 15 to 20 page paper in college on The Prestige.
What was the thesis of it?
I don't know. I don't remember.
You don't remember what it was?
And my professor doesn't remember either because he most certainly didn't read it
Was the whole paper a magic trick set in 3 acts?
It was a magic trick in that I survived writing it.
That would have been good though if you made it like a 3-act, just like how the movie had 3. That's what that movie was good. Like that movie was a good movie.
I didn't like it at
That's
first.
That's a Nolan movie. He's good. That was one of his early ones.
Yeah, it's kind of dark. It's before Nolan got like very war-y. I don't like all of his like when he started going into war films. I was like, all right, I'm tapping out on this. Yeah. But it's darker than what I usually like as far as a movie's concerned. But it is a good movie.
Yeah,
so I've never seen it.
He has an eclectic mix of films. Like he did Batman, then I think he did The Prestige, then he did The Dark Knight. And then he had, he had Interstellar in there. I think it was Inception then. Then he did, the third movie in the Dark Knight trilogy. He did Interstellar. He's kind of like, when we're talking about Pixar, we're talking about Disney Animation. He's kind of like the like live action Pixar, where he takes these like huge concepts and ideas, like Inception. Like I'm gonna go into your dreams and implant a memory, or like interstellar space travel, and he makes these live action movies. But The Prestige was a good one, and that was one of his early ones.
Yeah, it was back when you could still follow his movies.
I think you can follow them now. So, but Signs was another one under there with M. Night Shyamalan, which was a big one. So Michael Eisner, when he took over for Disney, did a similar thing. So they still had Touchstone, but then he created Hollywood Pictures in 1989. Same idea, just a different label. They didn't have many successful films under the Hollywood Pictures label. The biggest was The Sixth Sense. So it was another M. Night Shyamalan. So I don't know why they did one under Touchstone, one under Hollywood Pictures, but that was kind of the biggest one under that.
Yeah, and Touchstone had a deal with Jerry Bruckheimer, which if that name kind of rings a bell,
he was another big one
for
that they
you.
Worked with.
He was pretty big, especially we were talking about Pirates of the Caribbean earlier, but he had a deal with them from 1993 to 2014. That's 11 years.
Yeah, they basically did.
No, that's
21.
21 years.
21 years. Yeah.
So
yeah, they basically did all of his movies.
So that's Con Air, Armageddon, Gone in 60 Seconds, Pearl Harbor, which again, those are all just some pretty big movies in like the 90s, early 2000s. So yeah, I mean, like they had a lot of success using that label.
Yeah, and what's interesting is he produced the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, which was a PG-13 film, but that was actually released under Disney. And I feel like that was kind of the end of like Touchstone and Hollywood Pictures. Like they had started phasing it out, and then once Pirates of the Caribbean came out and did so well under the Disney umbrella as a PG-13 movie, then they kind of went, audiences will accept more adult movies under Disney. We don't necessarily need all of these different labels. Now they kept Touchstone for like rated R, like very mature adult stuff on there, but after a while it basically did not produce anything, and the only reason it was around was to distribute DreamWorks films, and they had a deal with DreamWorks, and then kind of once that ended, they basically folded that brand in Hollywood Pictures, because again they saw it as they don't need these other brand extensions anymore, because kind of they could do what they were basically doing just under Disney. But my point with all this being, Disney has done this before and has had success branding themselves under a different name. It allowed them to try other things. It allowed them to work with other filmmakers. It wasn't, they didn't have to make a princess movie. Like they didn't have to, they could find movies that seemed to work, help produce them and develop them. That, again, The Waterboy, like you would never think of any of that stuff.
Never think
The Prestige, like you would never think of any of that stuff as being done with Disney, because it was done under, a different production company, but for all intents and purposes, it was basically Disney. And so there's a precedent for this, and I think Disney should look at this for animation. And, I knew, obviously, Disney bought Pixar. Pixar was an independent animation company in the 90s, very successful. Disney distributed all of their movies. And then ultimately ended up acquiring them because basically all of their characters were the only ones people wanted to see in the theme parks, and they didn't care about the princesses and stuff to the extent anymore, because Disney wasn't coming out with a lot of great movies around that time, around like the late 90s and stuff.
Early 2000s, because I mean obviously the 1990s were big. That was Disney Renaissance, but I think that again the characters there, like having a Hercules in the park or having the Lion King in the park, maybe not as easy to have. Like those movies were successful, but the conversion to the park wasn't as good.
Yeah, well, but if you look at the 4 movies that were released under Disney Animation before they bought Pixar, they were Chicken Little.
Yeah.
Brother Bear, which I know you love.
I love that movie.
Treasure.
I will fight anybody over Brother Bear.
Treasure Planet.
That was a good movie too.
And Atlantis: The Lost Empire.
Also a good movie.
They were good, but
they didn't
nobody
get
talks
success.
about them.
Yeah.
They didn't get success. So those were the 4 most recent movies where, Pixar, the movies that were released before, their early movies, you had Toy Story, you had Bug's Life, you had Monsters, Inc., you had Finding Nemo. Like, those were all the characters people wanted to see. But looking into this, what I found fascinating, and I didn't really realize this because I think part of the other issue, like I talked about, is like, hey, you get too big and do you almost become afraid to take creative risks as much? I think the other problem is, and people have talked a lot about this, is Pixar specifically, it costs them too much money to make these movies. Like when they were all making $800 million, $1 billion, it's fine to then spend $200 million on a movie. When it works, it works. When it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like you look at Super Mario, the Super Mario movie, they made that for $100 million. Whereas it seems like every Pixar movie is at least $200 million. And so it becomes very difficult to be successful when you're spending twice as much money as basically any other animation studio out there.
This reminds me a lot of the Apple story. If you think back to like the early 2000s, everybody had all these different kinds of phones. I mean, you had like a Nokia phone, you had Blackberries, there were tons of different phones. And then Apple came out and theirs was far and away better and more advanced than everybody else's. And slowly everyone kind of got Apple devices, and then like a lot of these other companies fell away, and then really like kind of Android emerged, and those are really the only 2 phones that people really own now is Apple and Android. And I feel like Apple's kind of found themselves in a similar place with Disney, where it's like their phones for a long time, like now they improve their camera. They're improving
they don't
their camera.
innovate as much.
They're
anymore.
not innovative.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the early 2000s, it was like, whoa, I can put my music on my phone. Like it just,
because
there were
they can't have a failure. If they try something new and nobody buys that phone,
right, and then they're going to lose all of their customers to Android.
Then they're in, because they're in these 1 and 2 year renewal cycles, and it's like they have to get everybody to buy a new phone every couple years, and the story will become, oh, nobody bought this phone, it's a flop, and then it's kind of like, oh, Apple's not impervious, to stuff now, and so the wheels are going to kind of like slowly start falling off. But you're right, like they got so big that they don't really try anything new. Like you're right, you had the iPhone, then it became touchscreen, fully touchscreen. They got rid of the button. Like they took some leaps, but now you're right. It's they're basically the same phone every year.
Their innovation is pretty much just the system that they've built.
It's the speed of it. They're innovating around like the features, but you're right. It's not like a huge leap.
It's also it integrates with your watch. It integrates with your computer. And so you want to stay in the Apple ecosystem. And if you want to step outside of the Apple ecosystem, you can, but it's not going to be flawless. Like,
yeah. And it's like, it's also like the perception, like, there are like foldable phones, but they don't always work 100% right, and they can break. So it's like Apple could do that, but then if they do that, it's gonna be like, well, Apple made a cheap phone that doesn't work. Like they're trying to maintain this level of quality that, you're right, like all of these other Android phones, they can try stuff because they're trying to stand out in the market, it's a good kind of parallel, like you said, like with Disney and Pixar. They're trying to just maintain that level of quality. Like you don't want to have a movie. That's one of the things about Wish. Like people are like, the animation seems like a downgrade. It seems like TV animation, and it was the style of it. Like they were going for.
I was gonna say, I take so much issue. Yeah, I take so much issue with that.
But
comment.
a lot of people talk like that was what people were talking about. Is like they were saying like this isn't up to quality.
But
and
it was a different type of animation, right. So it wasn't supposed to look like everything else, which is what you're saying.
Yeah, which is my
point.
They
weren't allowed to have that innovation because people said, "Oh, it doesn't look the same. It doesn't look as good." But it was it was really supposed to look like a storybook.
Yeah.
And so it looked like it was coming out of an old page of storybook. And that was actually one of my favorite things about the movie is they differentiated it in that way.
Right. But you're right. But if it wasn't under Disney, if it was under some other umbrella, people would be like, oh, I love the connections to Disney. You know, like they wouldn't be focusing on that animation. So yeah, now what do you get? You just get all these sequels. You get Moana 2, Frozen 3. Like, you know, you're going to get all these sequels because they're going to kind of be reluctant, I think, to try this. But kind of going back to the production costs of the movies and things like that. So I did not realize how quickly the switch flipped in terms of how much these movies cost. So Pixar was making movies for under $100 million, if you look at this. And they were also making movies at a much slower pace. And I think some of that was just because of technological advancements took longer. Like I think between Toy Story and A Bug's Life, it was like 2 or 3 years. And then they kind of got to like maybe like one a year, one every like 1 to 2 years. But they were making them sub $100 million. Disney purchased Pixar in 2006. Cars came out in 2006, so kind of around the same time. So that I'm not counting that one because that was under development, like under Pixar. So it's kind of around the same time. But Ratatouille was the first movie released after Disney had purchased them. The budget for that movie was $150 million. So they basically went up $50 million immediately after Disney purchased them. And in every movie after that, they were at least $150 million to $200 million. And they also started releasing movies once a year and sometimes twice a year. And so it's amazing to see that, like, it seems like Disney buying them almost kind of completely changed their model where their movies became twice as expensive overnight and they had to make twice as many movies as they were, which becomes very difficult to come up with creative ideas if you have to make twice as many movies. You know, I mean, it works when it works. Like, you know, you look at Finding Dory did well as a sequel, Toy Story 4. Then you have Coco in there as an original movie, Incredibles 2. Like those all did 800, a billion, 1.2 billion. So it works well. You can spend 150, $200 million on there. But then it goes really off the rails when it doesn't work. So when you have all these movies coming out on Disney Plus for free, and then you have like Lightyear, which did horrible at the box office, like the stories kind of, I feel like weren't as strong. And then you have that huge budget. It becomes so difficult to kind of maintain that.
I do wonder what the reason for the budget inflation is. I don't know. Like, do they pay their animators better? So maybe they try to attract the best talent, and so they compensate them better. Is it that, you know, they outsource some of the work that they do on the movie, so they have to basically pay a little bit more because they don't own something?
Yeah, my guess is it's a couple things. My guess is it's a couple things. One, if you look at the voice actors, it's a much higher caliber.
I don't know, Tom Hanks and
okay, so Tom Hanks, I'll give you Tom Hanks was a pretty big name, but I doubt he took a ton of money because they were Pixar.
And Tim Allen,
right? But they were Pixar though, so I bet you as a new movie studio, they probably took a deal. Okay, they probably didn't get paid as much money.
My only thought is maybe Tim Allen and Tom Hanks had young children at the time, and so they were willing to lend their voices to be Buzz and Woody because they were like, hey, my kids will enjoy this. I'll still get paid, but my kids can then hear me as these characters.
And they might have gotten equity in the companies. I mean, I don't know. But the other thing is Tom Hanks' brother apparently does the voice of Woody for all of the like video game versions of it.
Oh, really?
And so his brother is like set for life because Tom Hanks did Woody, and any other like non-movie thing that they do for Toy Story, it's his brother. And it's like like a sweet gig he has. So there's something to be said for that. But
I think this is kind of like the Heinz ketchup commercials, if you've ever seen these, where I'm Sharon Heinz or whatever. I think I'm a Hanks. Do you think I could do Woody's voice?
No, I don't think you can.
Woodista?
Okay. All right, but sure. Well, I'll give you Toy Story with Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. But if you look at Cars, do you think Larry the Cable Guy is getting a ton of money?
But Owen Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, Owen Wilson's not huge, but now you have Chris Pratt and Tom Holland were in Onward. I mean, they're not cheap. Like you're getting much more expensive talent. What?
That's just funny. You just reminded me of another animated character that Chris Pratt voiced. I kind of forgot he was a voice in that, and then he's the voice of Mario, and then he's doing Garfield, right?
Yeah, he's Garfield too. Yeah, he voices everything. But him and Tom Holland aren't going to be cheap. You have Jamie Foxx. Like, they're getting bigger names, so like obviously that's going to be more expensive. When they're doing sequels, again, like I'm sure Ellen maybe took less money on Finding Nemo, but then as the star of Finding Dory, she's probably going to get paid more. Tom Hanks and Tim Allen are probably making more money, so that's going up. But I think the other thing is just the speed at which they're making them. So they're probably working more overtime. Like, if you need to make a movie in a year versus 3 years, you're gonna have to spend a lot more money to get it done quicker, because you're gonna need more animators, you're gonna need more people, and probably just like the general oversight of you're an independent animation company, kind of making your own rules, doing whatever you want, versus being part of this huge machine at Disney that now you got to worry about, well, how does this character play with audiences? What about the merch opportunities here? What about the story? Like, there's probably just so many more levels to it that it goes up. But yeah, it was pretty amazing how quickly this happened. So I think for all of these reasons, so I think, Pixar, Disney Animation, I think they continue doing what they're doing. But Disney, I do think, needs another outlet. The interesting thing is they had another outlet. When they bought Fox, they got 20th Century Studios, obviously, with that. They have Searchlight Pictures, so they're kind of doing that on the live-action movie front. They still have movies that are technically Disney movies, but not. But part of that was 20th Century Animation, and there was Blue Sky Studios there. So they did the Ice Age movies and the Rio movies. Are basically kind of what they're known for.
Yeah, solid movies too.
Right. So Disney said in 2021 that it was basically too expensive to have 3 animation studios. And they decided to close that animation studio. And I think that was such a bad idea, because they have this studio there.
Yeah.
Nobody associates them with Disney.
Right.
They could say,
I still to this day, when you say Ice Age is technically now a Disney movie, I'm like, what?
Well, they made a Disney Plus series like for Ice Age and stuff, and then after that they kind of like closed them down. They had this outlet, and they were working on movies. One of the movies they were working on, Nimona, ended up going on Netflix and doing extremely well.
Yeah, so this movie got basically canceled. They were working on it, and then they were like, nope, we're getting rid of the studio. You're no longer going to produce this movie. They took it over to Netflix and like, hey, we'd like to do this movie. And then it was nominated for an Oscar. We haven't watched it yet, but I pulled it up on Netflix, and there's a trailer on there, and it looks incredible. So it's like, it's from a graphic novel, and it's like it looks like it's a knight. It's like a knight. He gets accused of a crime he didn't commit, and then
it's kind of sci-fi. It's kind of like a Pixar thing. Like, she's a shapeshifter, and my vampire. Maybe she has fangs.
I think it's just because she's animal. Yeah. Like, she has a lot of, because she's a shapeshifter, and she tends to use that for animals. So she just has like sharper teeth.
But it has a cool animation style to it too.
Yeah,
like a unique. It's not.
It's quite like video gamey, but
I would say it's not quite to the level of Spider-Verse. To that extent, but it feels kind of comic booky, graphic novel, video gamey. It's
somewhat like anime, video game, like almost like a mashup there. But it's really cool looking, really like innovative. And then the idea behind the movie, it kind of seems like there's also that heart that Disney usually has in their movies, where you have a character who has been misjudged, and that's sort of the root of the movie is learning to kind of get past judgments that you passed on people. I mean, 100% I'm going to be watching that this week.
Yeah.
Like, it looks so good.
And I think, the fact that it came out on Netflix, I mean, like, that's the model too of have an animation studio. Don't spend more than $100 million on these movies. Make them cheaper. They don't need to, again, be the Pixar quality. Like, the water doesn't have to look like real water, like it does in these movies, like in Moana and stuff like that.
Stylize it, yeah.
Yeah, stylize it, and then sell it to Netflix. Like, Disney's trying to figure out how to make money on streaming. Don't put all your stuff on Disney Plus. Like, sell it to other streaming companies. Make Netflix pay for it, and then if it turns out awesome, then you have a brand with it. It's another outlet. The other thing, I mean, I think would be smart is, like, Pixar always used to do the shorts. like before the Pixar movies. And early Pixar, they use that as a way to like test the technology. Why not make shorts still? Because I know like Pixar was like, oh, we're going to make Disney Plus series. And then everything became, we can't spend money on streaming because we're losing too much money. So everything's box office. But why not let the animators make some shorts, try out new characters, throw them on Disney Plus? It's very low risk because nobody expects a ton of stuff from the shorts. And then maybe something pops off there.
This is a really popular short, so maybe we could take this idea and develop it more and create a whole, a whole universe around it and just develop the idea into a full-fledged story.
Yeah, not even a whole universe, but I mean, just like a series, like an extended Disney Plus series or a movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that the series are making them any money, though, is the only problem. And
well, it drives people, but again, sell it to another streamer. Like, I think there's different ways around it, and I think it's a way to try something. You're right. Just putting it on Disney Plus maybe isn't
enough, yeah.
But it's content. I mean, they need content on Disney Plus. So if they can do it inexpensively and they can get people excited of this is something to see, or like they have the Pixar short movies in Epcot over by the Imagination Pavilion, like update those. Like I think there's a way to kind of to build something. So I think you could do it with Pixar. I mean, even Lucasfilm. Like researching this, Lucasfilm has an animated movie. It's the only non-Star Wars animated thing that they've done. It's called Strange Magic. I think it's on Disney Plus. I want to see this because it's a 2015 movie, so it's after Disney bought them, and it's a jukebox musical. It's kind of based on A Midsummer Night's Dream, but it was like a story George Lucas wrote. And it's a very unique animation style. Like they're all, I want to say like ogres and stuff. Like it's kind of what they look like. But again, I've never heard of this. But
so they made Shrek.
No, I mean it's very different.
It's kind of jukeboxy.
It's definitely not Shrek, but yeah, kind of maybe on the same lines. But like we've never heard of this, so I don't think it probably did super well. But I think it's good that they tried it. Because again, it's not like it ruined Lucasfilm animation, like they should try more things like this. So I think that's the point, is just like, you had this studio. It's not like they can't create another studio or even another brand name. I mean, still let Pixar make it. Let Pixar try it, or Disney Animation try it, but just issue it under something else, kind of like they did with Touchstone, because I think they need that. I think
it's like an invisibility cloak.
Yeah, and it's a shield of being like, oh, that movie wasn't good. Well, that wasn't Pixar. That wasn't Disney. That was this other thing that we have, that you're going to come in with different expectations. And I think that's the biggest thing. That's what Disney found back in the 80s with Touchstone, is if you say it's Disney, people have certain expectations. And how do you get around that? And I think that's the trouble Disney's running into now, is if you say it's Pixar, if you say it's Disney, people have certain expectations. And how do you meet those expectations? Well, the easiest way to know is you have a sequel and you have something that everybody's familiar with. And I think they need an outlet to try other things where people have low expectations or no expectations. It's a lot easier to surpass those expectations if you come in with very little. And I think it could be successful for them long term.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea just to refresh things and renew things, because I think right now they are definitely in a rut. So they need to do something to break out of that, to break out of their cycle of, we make a new movie, we now make a sequel, we made a movie in the past, it was really successful and beloved, and now we make a live action version of it. So they need to do something to get away from that, to sort of bring that magic and that storytelling back.
Yeah, it's a way to break out of this rut. I feel like that they're going to get themselves into,
or that they're into.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, but that wraps up the show for this week. Let us know what you think. Like, do you think it's a good idea for Disney to create a new studio? Like, would you like to see Disney try something different, or maybe like, no, just give me all the sequels. Give me Moana 2, Moana 3. Just put a number after it, and I will go see it. You can let us know over on our Instagram at Enchanted Ears Podcast, or if you're watching this on our YouTube, just let us know in the comments below. But I want to thank everybody again for listening this week. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for lending us your ears.
And just a reminder, we are off next week, but we'll see you in 2 weeks here on Monday.
Bye-bye.